Hi guys, so I want to show you this video of my old friend David Davis. If you remember David Davis, he went to meet with the chief negotiator of the European Union, Michel Barnier, as a member of Theresa May's administration. He arrived at the meeting with Michel Barnier without any documentation, without even a pen. And during the talks, he folded after about 20 minutes. He was also famously had said that negotiations would be in Berlin, not in Brussels. So he didn't actually realize that the capital of the European Union, in a sense, is in Brussels, not in Berlin. But let's hear what he has to say.
The belief by some quite extreme Euro fanatics, as it were, inside the European Commission, that any success by Britain would undermine the European project.
No, it's not any success. It's a particular result that they're worried about. So they're afraid that, and I think they have every reason to be afraid, that they could end up with having a Singapore-style country on their border. They don't want that. Why is that a problem? They don't want a country on their peripheral, which is low regulation, low taxation, a free-for-all in a sense. That's still pretty much connected to the European mainland by a tunnel that trades back and forth huge amounts of goods and services. It doesn't want to have that. And I fully understand the reason why they don't want that. And it's not Euro fanatics that are worried about this. It's generally the European Union. You don't have to, call people fanatics if they're worried about this. This is what you want to create under Brexit.
That would undermine the European single market and so on. Now, that's why we designed Canada Plus, because they'd already struck those deals with all these other countries. So if they'd struck it with Canada and they struck it with Korea, how can it undermine the single market?
Okay, once again, I don't know if he doesn't understand or he's pretending not to understand. What is the glaring difference between Canada, Korea, and the UK? Distance. Canada is far away, Korea is far away. This is just one of the reasons that Michel Barnier said you can't have a Canada-style deal, because Canada is completely different. Also, just even if we ignore the distance for a moment, the economies are completely different. If you compare the Canadian economy and the UK economy, they're completely different. The Korean economy and the UK economy, they're completely different. The types of services and trade that you have between the European Union and those other countries is completely different to the trade trade in goods and services you have with the UK. So that's why you can't have a Canada-style plus. You can try and work towards something, but even if you said, let's try and work towards a Canada plus deal, but the UK wants to deviate, wants to diverge, not align itself with any type of agreements. So you're talking about, we want to have something that's similar to what the EU and Canada have, but at the same time, we don't want to have any type of agreement.
Protectionism, if you like, on the part of the French mostly, but French, Germans, many other European countries too, but primarily the French. The French operate under a mythology that Britain is a sort of wild west of deregulation. I mean,
and what you want to do under Brexit is that. How many years have we listened to people like you saying the European Union regulations are a stranglehold on us? We want to eliminate red tape from the European Union. So you're talking, and it's a central pillar of Brexit, the idea of eliminating regulations. So now you're saying, well, the French have this mythology that we want to get rid of regulations. But that has been your central tenet of Brexit over the last number of years. Really, does David Davis not understand this? Has he not been listening to the rhetoric of Brexit over the last number of years?
talk to any small business in this country, they think you're mad for saying that. But that's what the French seem to believe. Now, this is nonsense. Our safety levels at work are better than anywhere else in Europe and have been for our entire membership. No country competes with us.
Okay, and he's right, as far as I know. I'm not completely sure. I haven't looked at the data, but I'll give him that. The UK has higher standards than the European requirements. Why is that? Like, he just says it and then goes ahead. He doesn't say why that's the case. Because the UK used to be a member, and it used to lead the way on many fronts within the European Union. And I applaud that, and that's one of the reasons why I think the European Union is something lesser without the UK involved. Now, recently, it has changed direction. And you are talking about, well, we can increase our standards. So we have higher standards than the European Union, but we need to leave to increase those standards. That doesn't make any sense to me. So he's saying that we have the best standards, but we need to leave in order to have the best standards while we were still members. Okay, I don't know how he squares that circle.
Our holidays are better. You name it.
What? Our holidays are better. Are you like looking around the room and you see a picture of an umbrella on a beach and you say, okay, our holidays are better? Oh my God.
There's a whole series of things which are better in Britain. So basically this is a terrifying... It goes to the point that the French in particular, but others are terrified that somehow we're going to be more competitive than them. Actually, the truth is we are, but they won't be able to stop it because we're an 85% services economy. We're going to win on intellectual property. We're going to win on our skills. We're going to win on being the best country in the world at genetics or the best country in the world at artificial intelligence.
But we want to win on these subjects. We want to win in these areas, but we want to create an immigration policy that eliminates the best people from coming in. We want to reduce the best people from coming in to join these expanding fields. How do you expect to develop the greatest minds if you're not open to accepting people from other countries? There are people who would like to live in the UK, who'd like to work there, who'd like to study, but you don't want them. For what reason? Brexit, taking back control. Do they not understand? They're talking about, we want to be free, we want to create the best country in the world, the best minds, but we don't want the best minds to come here. We want to maybe invent them ourselves. David Davis is not exactly the best example.
Or the best country in the world at the software behind self-driving cars. You name it. They won't be able to.
And why do you think that until now most of these companies wanted to come to the UK? Because you're English speaking, which is very important, and because you were a European Union member. Now that's gone. So why did David Davis give us a list of all the companies that queued up on the 1st of February to join, to open factories in the UK? You left the European Union on the 31st of this January, the 1st of February. I'll give you a day. It's even now, the 18th of March. How many? Give us a list of companies who signed up over these months. Started to build factories in the UK because you're now no longer a member of the European Union. I'd love to see a list.
To stop us doing that. But they have a very old-fashioned, mercantilist, heavy industry approach to the world that says, if you don't have enough regulations, they'll defeat us. We will win our way in the world without that. Well,
Insanity.
Truth be told, Boris and I discussed this as we went through it, and Boris was, to be fair to him, the reason I supported him in the leadership contest was because he was supportive of everything I said through the way. So first off, Don't let them determine the timetable. Because if you do, they'll do the bits that they care about first and the bits you care about last, if ever, right?
So let me get this straight. You said, yeah, we'll set a timetable for an agreement that we want, that the EU is indifferent about. Okay, so I don't even know how to approach this. It's like, I can't even think of an analogy. It's so ridiculous. We'll set the time limit for us to have what we want, but you're not within that time limit. Because this is the crux of the problem for Boris Johnson. He's set a time limit to have a deal within the end of the year. Now, it looks likely that the transition period is going to be extended. It's not set in stone yet, but it looks, because of the current events. But let's say it stays. Boris Johnson has set a time limit, and the European Union said, we don't have any time limit. If you want to have it, that's you have set the time limit, and we're not confined by that. If it takes 6 months, we'll do it in 6 months. If it takes 6 years, we'll do it in 6 years. Because David Davis doesn't seem to understand that when a no deal happens, the day after you have to have a deal. You have to start working to sell things. Look at the current events where people are queuing up, stealing toilet paper. A no deal would be a similar scenario. What do you think is going to happen if the ports in Dover are shut? Because the French say, well, we're not going to accept your trucks. Most toilet paper actually is imported to the UK. The UK imports most of its toilet paper. So people are going crazy over toilet paper recently. In a no-deal scenario, there would be no toilet paper because nothing would be imported. Just to give a ridiculous example. But this is what Boris Johnson and David Davis want. But setting a timetable with a limit means you're the one who's stuck in the timetable, not the European Union.
That's the first thing.
Sorry.
Second thing is lay on the table what you want. Don't be afraid of saying, this is the trade deal we want. Why? Because what we want is actually attractive to many European countries. Because what we're saying is maximising the trade between us, and trade between two countries is good for both. And the Germans actually don't want to lose access to the British market for their car industry. They call us...
I know we're back to this ridiculous, idiotic example once again. Yes, the German car industry will come running to save us because they want to sell. The number of cars that the Germans sell to the UK is tiny. But where have the German car industry been over these last 3 years? Why haven't they been calling up David Davis saying, give us some time to put pressure on Angela Merkel to do your bidding for you, because we don't want to lose you as a market. This is just same old Brexit rhetoric, and it's been proven wrong. There has been no pressure from olive oil producers in Italy, or olive producers in Greece, or German car industry on their Prime Minister or Chancellor. This hasn't happened over the last 3 years. And you're expecting it to happen now?
Treasure Island, because cars sold here are so profitable for them, so they don't want to lose that. So lay out in clear terms.
Does he really not understand it at this stage? That ship has sailed. That rhetoric you could have used before the referendum. But now you can't. It's proven empty.
What you're after and why you think it's good for both sides. Thirdly, use the other things that people don't talk about. One of the mistakes that Theresa made was to say to the Europeans, whatever you do, we won't stop dealing with you on the military front, on the security front and so on. Well, actually, that's massively to their advantage. If they really are going to be to go in for sort of economic warfare against us, which is almost what some people are talking about. I don't think it'll ever happen, but the sort of terms of it, then we should be saying to them, okay, fine. Then we will be a complete third country, and we'll deal with you as a third country. So there's that leverage.
How is that leverage? You are a small country attempting to use leverage against a large country. You still don't understand that the European Union is bigger than the UK. Yes, this issue of security, but everything that you attempt to use against the European Union, maybe you have some leverage, and I've talked about this in a previous video, about how the UK may have leverage against over the European Union on the issue of security. But do you think they're going to go, oh, well, you have us on some security in Eastern European countries, so that means we'll give you whatever you want on anything else? No. You may have leverage there, but they're not going to bend to your will in other areas. They may compromise on security and then say, okay, now let's move on to the next issue. Maybe I'm not a negotiator. I don't know how these things work exactly. But I don't think it's working. I don't think it works in the way David Davis. David Davis shouldn't be on TV. He was embarrassed by Michel Barnier. Why is he still giving people advice?
It's true. So the whole series of bits of leverage there. The other thing to say is the withdrawal agreement was put together and agreed to by us on the presumption that we would go forward to a free trade agreement on a Canada-style model. I think the change of stance by the European Union on this is not acting in good faith. And so if they insist on this...
No, there was nothing in the withdrawal agreement about a Canada-style plus agreement. You're saying that's what we wanted, that's what we expected, but there's nothing written down about it. If you don't have something written down, then you can't expect it to be respected. It's like, yeah, well, that was the feeling, and now the European Union is not going along with it. Well, please give us an example of Michel Barnier saying, on TV or written down somewhere that the UK could have a Canada-style deal after the transition period or after the withdrawal agreement was implemented. I can't see any examples. Maybe David Davis has an example he can show us. But I think he's just pulling it out of his ass.
Hardline approach. At the end of it, we should go back and say, well, actually, the withdrawal agreement doesn't necessarily stand under those circumstances, and we'll repudiate some of it. And so maybe...
So we'll tear up an international agreement. So the European Union has... You sat down and you agreed a document. Both of you. Boris Johnson's administration and the European Union sat down and had an agreement, the withdrawal agreement, and they both signed it. The European Union's obligations were to implement it in European parliaments, and that was done. And the UK's obligation was to pass it through Parliament and get it done. And Boris Johnson signed it. And now you're talking about tearing it up. So you're asking for Boris Johnson to tear up his own agreement. The one that he signed, the one that was passed through a sovereign parliament, your parliament. So, just for a moment, think about this. You want him to destroy an agreement that passed through your parliament, so that's making a complete sham of the British Parliament, but also a complete sham of Britain, because if you tear up agreements the way Donald Trump does, how would that gain you respect in the international community? Give you a reputation as someone who agrees one thing one day and tears it up the next when you don't like the wording or you don't like the feeling.
A bit of the money or maybe some other elements of it. We'll look after the European citizens. We're not an uncivilized country. We'll expect them to look after our citizens. But
Brexiteers are not uncivilized. Look at what's happening at the moment. If you want a question about civilization,
use every weapon you have in the negotiating armory, and don't be namby-pamby about it. Say, look, This is our national interest we're dealing with here. This is our future we're dealing with here. This is the democratic will of the people, which bluntly, I think, doesn't just trump politicians' views here, it trumps their views too. Because remember, the European Commission is not a democratic institution. It's a bureaucratic institution.
And we're back to this. Who elects the members of the European Commission? I'd like him to answer this question. Are these people who spring out of the ground, fall from the sky? Look, I have my criticisms of the European Commission, but you can't say that the people there are not elected. Some of them are elected in a more democratic way than the first past the post system.
And so if you say to them, sorry, your views matter less than British people's views. But at the end of the day, you come back to the base of it.
Sorry, I'm going to end the video here because it's going to go on for over half an hour. I'll link to the original video in the description. But he comes back to this idea that we are going to use whatever we can against the European Union, but we want the European Union not to use anything against us. This is where I think his entire ideology collapses, breaks down, falls apart, whatever you want to use. He has this idea that we must use whatever leverage we have, whatever tricks we can find, whatever browbeating we can do against the European Union, but they must not use anything against us. In this way, he doesn't understand how negotiations work. And that's probably one of the reasons why he turned up with no documents to meet Michel Barnier, and he collapsed after 20 minutes. Because he doesn't understand negotiations. When you negotiate, for example, you go to buy a car, a second-hand car. I'm not a negotiator, so don't take this as advice or anything. But when you buy a second-hand car, you want to get a good price. But the person on the other side wants to get a good price also for them. So if you're looking at the car, you say, there's a few dents here, maybe it needs an oil change. You can use some of these things, these tactics, to help lower the price. You look at it, and there's a scratch on the side. The person wants £10,000. You say, look, to fix this scratch, it's going to cost me maybe £100. Can you knock £100 off the price? And they say, okay. But then maybe they can also say, look, this car has very low mileage. I'm selling it to you at this price. You're not going to find another car of this type at this price with these low mileage, for example. So there's a give and take. But you don't go to buy a car expecting just to criticize and not get any kickback, any response. Otherwise, you're an idiot. Or you're such a good negotiator, you can manipulate other people. But David Davis is not someone who comes across as someone who can manipulate other people. I've given this comparison in the past. Imagine I'm going to buy a BMW. That'd be nice, but it's impossible for me. Imagine I'm going to buy a BMW, and not the negotiator who's selling the car to me is not the local salesman, but he's the head of sales for BMW in Germany. Now, he or she, maybe it's a she, no offense intended, but he or she is going to sell the car probably much better than the local dealer can. Maybe not, but they probably have a lot more experience than the local dealer has. This is like what David Davis is. I am like David Davis, and the German head of sales who's coming over to sell me a car is like Michel Barnier. Who do you think is going to be more successful? That's all I have to say. Once again, I'll link the original video in the description. I recommend you check it out. But once again, I don't understand why David Davis is brought on TV. He's given interviews. To what pro? What is the advantage of this? He's just embarrassing himself. Let me know in the comments once again. Much appreciated. Thanks.